Well, hi, I'm Tom Ribbecke. I'm up here with Bobby Vega and Randy Vincent today. We're trying our first episode from with some technical panache here. We're actually working at Gerard Angers' Electric Squirrel Studios up in Healdsburg. Really fascinating place where Gerard does so much of his fantastic work for us. And if you've seen these videos, you have to appreciate the wonderful work he's been doing with us. But today, we have a unique pleasure. We have two great guitar players as part of what we're doing here, two really great guitar players. I don't throw those words around easily because that's my world. But we have the great Randy Vincent here with us, and we have John Stowell, who's sitting quietly waiting for his chance to get up here and talk a bit. And we wanted to just talk a little bit, have you on, and talk a little bit about, about your career. And for years and years and years in Santa Rosa, I follow your career. I hear about you all the time, and you're one of those guitar players, And so I just wanted to ask you a little, just get to know you a little bit, for the folks who hear you play all the time. When did you get your start playing and all? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, the very beginning was kind of an unlikely thing. I didn't have any big calling that I recall to be a musician necessarily. I stepped outside the front door of my parents' house in Orlando, Florida as a kid, and across the street I saw the neighbor that lived over there sitting out on the sidewalk strumming a guitar. I walked over there. I think he might have been playing the chords to Louie Louie or something like that, and it was just so exciting to me that it's like I said, oh, I want to do that, So I hounded my parents. They got a guitar, and then I just kind of goofed around with it for a number of years, and until I kind of had an epiphany. I guess, well, there's all kinds of little stages along the way, but the one moment that I think might be of interest is a moment when I found out that there was a guitar player named George Benson who was playing in town. No cover, no minimum. This was before he had any real major hits. And he had taken the kids down to visit Disney World and was sitting in with friends of his. And I went and heard it. My first reaction was, I quit. I'm selling my guitars. Sure. But and I was too shy to meet him. He was standing right there next to me for a minute on his break, and I just slinked out of the place. I was like overdosed on too many good notes.
Great player.
Yeah, and so I felt kind of bad that that I didn't talk to him, but that kind of was a conversion point for me. And many years later, I was able to play. I played with a student of mine named Julian Lodge, who you may be aware of, and we played a duo opening for George Benson. And when we started to play, he came out and stood there by the stage and watched us the entire time, and was very complimentary and very nice to us. And I was able to tell him that story, which I think he got a kick out of. So that was fun to finally get to do
story. That. Really, it's so nice when you hear these things. George shows up often at Luthier shows. He's a good guy who shows up and is interested in guitar makers, so we all run into George from time to time. So he's an amazing musical intellect. That brings me to a great question, because Julian, of course, is this area's sort of wonder kid, and what a tremendous young talent, but also just a beautiful person. I remember Julian coming into my shop when he was 7 and talking about how he was going to play jazz. He was doing Carlos, the Circle Theater, Star Theater with Carlos that night, and he was just a little guy. Did you know right away that when you have a history of turning out incredible students? There was also a Kai Devitt Lee, who's another brilliant young Healdsburg guitar player. So you have some gift about doing this with your teaching. You're a fine teacher.
Well, I've been very lucky to get good students like that. I can't, I'd like to claim responsibility for how good they are, but I can't really do it. I've just been fortunate, and I just try to make sure that I don't do anything to mess them up, you know.
Did you recognize that the ability that Julian had when you first?
Yes, I sure did right away. See, his story is very different from mine. Like you said, when his parents told me when he was 5, he was telling them that he was going to be a guitar player.
Yeah.
And so he knew. I had no clue. We were quite different from each other. I didn't start playing until I was 15.
Wow.
Wow. I remember Julian's mom saying to me one time, "Oh, it must be so interesting. You must really see yourself in this young student, you know." And I had to laugh and tell her, "Not even close."
No, yeah, because I remember, you know, his mom and his dad just so supportive.
Mm-hmm.
You know what
Yes.
I mean, and working and making sure that he has the guitar, this, and he's there, and he just was just soaking in that soil of that dream, of that vision of doing that, and then, but on top of that, though, being supported by the family,
Yes.
which was really, really like a unique, cool.
Well, he does have an extraordinary personality. You see him, he'd come to my parties and play, and you could hear a pin drop. And when he took the stage, he's got an angelic presence. It's really kind of different than most young guitar players. But, you know, you have to take some credit for somehow finding a way to help him blossom, because he really is a tremendously inventive and continuously inventive musician. I think if you don't give people the tools early in their career, because when somebody comes to study with you, you're really teaching them how to teach themselves, are you not, at some level, you know, somebody like
yes,
that?
but in Julian's case, you know, he was going to do it anyway, I think.
Yeah.
But there was no way to stop him. But basically, I just felt like, okay, my job here is to impart as honestly as I can, as much information as I can that I think will be of help from the years of experience that I've had playing. And I know he's going to take it and do something with it. There was a lot of things that I didn't have to worry about. With a lot of students, you have to struggle first to get them inspired to the point where they do take off on their own.
Right.
And they're not just depending on you to show it to them, you know. And then you struggle with them to figure out how to play with phrasing and with dynamics and with pacing and leaving space and all that. With Julian, right away when I heard him as an 8-year-old, it was like, oh, I'm not even going to have to worry about any of that stuff.
Yeah,
All that part is there. So now it's just throw out the information and let him take it.
Wow, you know, I didn't know that. I just always found it fascinating that you have those kinds of guys crossing you obviously teach at a very serious level, and you've written books on the subject. I've seen your book on the book about lines and a book about 3-chord forms. You want to talk about those guys a little bit?
Well, yeah, I have written some books. There's 3 that are available currently, and a 4th is in the works. It's on the way. It's already basically done. And I was fortunate in that for many years, my wife said maybe I should write something.
Oh,
but I ignored it. You know, it's like, oh, I'm too busy. I'm not a writer. I don't know how to do that. Well, one day I ended up getting a publisher. Chuck Shear from Shear Music Company called me and said, "Can you do a guitar version of Mark Levine's Drop 2 piano voicing book?" So it actually started with an assignment. So there I had something specific, a publisher saying, do it, and you know, and here's the deal. He told me what the details of the deal were. He's very fair, and it was just like, I couldn't say no. And then once I did that, I was rolling. As soon as I finished the first one, I knew what the second one was, and I just started writing, you know.
It opened up.
Yeah.
It's a great legacy to leave behind you. That's a great way of paying it forward when you teach other people and you put tools for them to learn, not just teach them. That's a great thing to do with your time. You know, I think I really appreciate the fact that you've done that. I hope other people do too. You know, it's and are you taking new students? Are you still?
Yes, I'm still busy teaching, and when I can fit them in, I take them.
And you're always busy playing. You're always busy playing, right?
Generally, yes. You know, I mean, there's slow spells. With the economy, you never know if you're going to stay real busy all the time. But John seems to be the guy that has a system worked out where he's going to be busy all the time. But sometimes I spend a couple of weeks sitting around wondering when the next gig is.
How many students do you have at any given point? You know.
Well, I try to keep it limited as much as I can, but there's 10 out at Sonoma State this time. So between that and 2 through the jazz school at Berkeley, and then the students that just come over to the house, it's really just about the maximum, but pretty close to the maximum. But a lot of them I'll just hit once in a while so I can sandwich in extra people if they call and want to fit in something. I can usually find a space in the schedule to put them in.
Great teachers are hard to find, much less access. And whenever I hear this discussed, you're kind of legendary for what you do in that world. You may not feel that way, but we hear about it from the periphery. I'm not really a jazz guy. I'm a guy who makes jazz guitars, but I'm not out there playing the jazz. But I hear about it from everybody and their brother, And you have a huge reputation in that area. So if you probably know this, but you're a quiet, understated guy, and you kind of have a very, a very modest approach to things. Really, I wanted to have you on here because I think people need to know more about you and your playing. And I've seen you play in many different situations. You're always amazing. It's really a stunning thing to see. So to have this vehicle for Bobby and I to do this with local area, even though neither of us are jazz musicians, we're musicians. You talk about that all the time. You talk about
when people say, "Oh, I'm playing jazz," or I just play music, and then after we finish playing it, you can call it and tell us what it was, because I don't know what it is until it's all out and put out and done.
Yeah, well, it's a name it's a label that people put on certain kinds of music. More than one kind certainly is called jazz, and some people will sometimes take issue with whether this one is or isn't jazz. I don't know, I'm not sure. I remember once as a young person, we were hanging out with Ira Sullivan in Florida, and a fantastic musician, and somebody had made the comment about how, back then I didn't even know what jazz was. And Ira Sullivan quickly said, I still don't know what jazz is.
Because to me, it's a sacred, it's a language. And when when I see people play it or hear deeply play it, I can emotionally hear it and see it. And if I try to go to play it, since I don't know the vocabulary, I don't want to disrupt the wave of what's going on, of that, so that I just hold it in a high, and maybe someday I will be able to sit and learn and be able to get it, so I wouldn't be so shy and intimidated or have that kind of thing about that word. But usually with that word, it's such a very strong word that goes behind, the impact that people hold it or when they're musicians.
Mm-hmm. I'd say one thing you could say is that it's a combination. When you said vocabulary, there's a tradition behind it, and you have to have roots in that tradition and understand that vocabulary. But it's also something that's moving forward and trying to push the edge. So it's got its roots in the past, but it's exploring into the future. So,
Yeah. I remember being a student listening to Coltrane in college. I had to write a paper on Coltrane. It was my first real exposure. I remember going through this period where everything sounded like music. Every noise I heard after listening to John for a half a year, everything I heard, a door opening, was music. And then one day I woke up and it was like back to ground zero. Everything was diatonic again. And then it was sort of I understand the vocabulary of jazz and I've studied it and I know it. Fascinating how that happens, how we recalibrate ourselves, as musicians to keep moving forward. I think that's, the whole purpose of this was not to play music, but we're going to have the great pleasure of having both you and John play together as part of this particular episode. And, we'll do that in a bit. But, the whole concept of just getting to know who you are and what drives you creatively. Why do you think you get up every day and you think, I'm going to play some music today? I mean, do you have any sense of what makes you do this? Any sense what's underneath it all?
I think I just got hooked at some point, You get kind of addicted to it, and I can't think of anything else I want to do when I get up in the morning. I'll put on a coffee. I have a cup and a half of coffee each morning. I put that on and then I pick up the guitar and sit down and start working.
Right away. I love that. People say, my cousin often says when we were back in high school and playing music in bands, he'd say, first thing I always see is you had a guitar in your bathrobe and a cup of coffee. It was what I expect out of this. And was it Muddy Waters said you have to sleep with a guitar close to your head if you really want to get good. This thing that fascinates me. To do the body of work that you leave on the planet is tremendous. You create teaching vehicles, you play, and we've been talking about this concept of notes that get put out in the cosmos, and once you make a statement, they almost never come back. It's just fabulous. You know, I want to thank you for doing what you do and doing it in my town, in the south of my town. But you know, it's just great to have luminaries like you here, and you know, I just really appreciate it. So from the bottom of my community's heart, thanks for teaching out the people you've taught. Keep on playing. You know, do what you do.
Well, you're welcome.
Fantastic.
It's my pleasure.
Someday maybe I'll try to study with you a little bit. I might learn something. It might hurt me. You know. But, so I think that we'll get ready to play a little music, and we'll move on to John, if that's okay. And does that work for everybody?
Yeah.
Great.
Thank
Well,
you.
thanks, Randy. Really
you're
appreciate you
welcome.
being up here and doing this with us.
Thank you, Randy.
And stay tuned.
Thank
You got
you.
a great treat coming.